Hey guys, William LeBaron with MonitorBase Insider Report for the week. It's the beginning of May, and looking back over the previous month, we want to give you some data insights. Now, keep in mind, this is insights from our own analysis of our own databases, so this isn't necessarily representative of the whole United States, but it's a good insight into what's happening in the mortgage market and in the housing market right now, week by week. So jumping right in, mortgage credit inquiries are up almost 20%, 18.8%. More mortgage credit triggers than we saw in our last report. Now, this is actually going to affect how some of these numbers roll out. So last week, we highlighted that there were about 22% of the mortgage credit triggers happening had an underlying mortgage less than 12 months old. Now, that number is now only about 20.7%, but 20.7% is because we've seen more credit triggers than we were seeing before. There's actually more of these mortgage loan applications happening with those young mortgages than we saw on the previous report. It continues to represent a really high EPO risk for loan originators production over the past 12 months. So keep that in mind. We're still in that really high risk range. So there's another really interesting change here. That big jump in number of credit inquiries that have been happening is actually mostly people with no mortgage. In fact, there has been a 50% increase in loan applications for people with no underlying mortgage over what we were seeing on the last report. So this is a really early trend that we're starting to see pick up, and keep that in mind in your efforts. There's a big uptake in mortgage loan applications for first-time homebuyers or homebuyers, presumably. So track that, and you're going to start seeing that if you're not already seeing that in your own pipelines. That's an interesting aspect of that big jump in mortgage credit activity. Now, as far as listings, there's been a couple of interesting changes. March actually ended with about a 15% decrease in active listings, but a 132% increase in houses under contract. That little trend, that big trend, has actually flipped on its head. We're now back to about a 22% increase in April over March's listing numbers, active listings, and about a 35% decrease in number of homes under contract. So that's getting back to a normal trend. There was a big change there from February to March, and then through April we're seeing that correcting itself, which is good. Because we need those listings for the housing market to function. It's really nice to see that back up to your February numbers. Still a trend this week, guys. The higher the credit score, the more likely they are to apply. Those with credit scores over 700 still representing over 70% of the mortgage credit triggers happening today. The increase there barely a change over last week. This is news for anyone that retains servicing. A big percentage of the loan activity happening is refinances of clients over 700 FICO scores. This is not ordinary. Generally, you see a good distribution of FICO scores. And so for people who are trying to retain servicing, this represents an increased risk because the clients leaving their portfolio are their high credit score clients. And when it comes to things like current risk for clients going into forbearance, losing your high credit, high qualified candidates out of a serviced portfolio and being left, only with that lower credit group is an issue. So we have lots of lenders, hoping that by increasing their FICO requirements, they're gonna, protect that database. But what they can also be focusing on today is recapturing their high FICO customers who are out there shopping for that refinance. Because if you're not, the overall credit quality of that service portfolio can be expected to be decreasing. Again, 75% of mortgage loan, credit triggers happening today. FICO scores over 700. It's a real oddity. If this report has been helpful to you, share it to someone that you might, think might find it interesting. But don't forget, subscribe to our blog and join our MonitorBase Insider group so you can get these reports weekly on what is happening in the market today. We have a report on the blog that goes into more detail than this video. This kind of hits the high points, and we're trying to keep you up to date on what's happening so you can be prepared and really keep on top of and make adaptation in the spur of the moment, the data that's happening, week by week.